Hello, my name is Diego Lizarazo, and this is the second part on the creating a video game series. It's based on the presentation that I made a few days ago at Georgia State University on preparation for the Global Game Jam this year. Basically, in the first presentation, the first video, we just created the bones of our project. We just laid down the basics of a cool project that you can use on the Game Jam, and in this video we're going to build on top of that, and we're going to have something a little more interesting to show. The video that follows after this quite likely is going to tell you what to do with your game after you are done with it. But let's get to it. Now, obviously, we have the basics for a small game. We have our enemy trying to destroy the main player, and we have a mechanic that is to tap on the enemies and destroy them, but we're missing too many things. For example, right now, nothing is happening really when the enemy is hitting our player, right? We are not having any kind of like feedback that is saying like, hey, we have a crash or something happens. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to add the concept of lives, right? We could just say that whenever the enemy hits the Millennium Falcon, the Centennial Eagle, we could just destroy it and that's the end of the game. But it would be much easier, and it's quite traditional, to give lives to the player, right? So to do that, we need some place where we're going to store the number of lives that we have so far. To do that, we're going to go here to the events, right click. I usually do it at the top. Well, we can do it at the bottom, and say add global variable. This case is going to be called lives, and the initial value, you can pick a number. I'm going to go for 3, so it's a good number, and I'm going to say okay, right? But now we're not really saying anything else. We are just adding a number that is there, that is stored. We're not changing it. What we do need to do is to add another event to calculate when an enemy is hitting my player, right? When something like this happens. So when do we do that? I'm going to say add an event, and I am going to say that the enemy is going to detect the collision, so I'm going to look for collision, and is on collision with another object, and that object is going to be my eagle, my main character. So when this happens, what do I have to do? Well, basically I should decrease the number of lives that we have here. Okay, so I am going to add an action, and because the global variable that we created, lives, is not something that has a plugin or a sprite representation, we have to go here to the system, and we have a section that is just for that, for local and global variables. So this one is, we can use subtract from, and we have a list, but right now we have only one global variable, that is lives, so that's it, and I'm going to decrease only one life, so that's fine. So that's it. Now if I execute this, we should be able to see that the number of lives decrease, right? But the thing is that we don't really have any kind of feedback from the game to the player saying that well, that we are decreasing the number of lives. So what is missing is something on the screen that is telling me like the number of lives. We have the variable here, but that doesn't mean that there is something here to show us. So we have to add something else. To do that, I'm going to double click. I'm going to add a text. It's going to be here. And I am going to change the text that is here at the bottom to lives 3. Okay, so it's really kind of like hard coding and saying that the number of lives is 3, right? We're not really doing much. But what we can do is to modify that text here every time that we find that collision and say, hey, this text, I'm going to set the text, and here we have like some quotes. So how this works is that everything that is inside the quotes is just going to pass as it is. So we have lives, period. So it's not going to do anything else. But everything outside the quotes, it's going to be a variable or something that is going to be calculated to find out the number, a number or a string that we're going to add there. So to concatenate, to basically merge what we already have here, lives, with the variable that is called lives, we use the ampersand. Okay, so with this, it's going to say, I'm going to print lives and then whatever number we have in the variable that is called lives. So I am going to execute this. So now we have something that is telling me the number of lives, and you see that every single time that an enemy comes, we have that the number of lives decreases. Okay, obviously we usually don't have many games with minus 15 or 16 lives. This is not exactly great, and that's because we're not adding a game over. We should have something that tells me like, hey, stop the game when this happens. So let's work on that, right? So what I'm going to do here is I am going to add another text. I'm going to put it here in the middle, and the text is going to be called game over. Well, it's going to show game over, and actually I'm going to name the entire variable, the entire element game over, so it's easy to identify that, so like this. And this game over looks a little small, so I am going to make it red, something quite visible, and I am going to make it like much bigger, so I'm going to go here to font, and I'm going to make it incredibly big, so big that does not appear there, and that's because we have to make this area much bigger. So let's make it something like this, right? But now we kinda we're breaking something that we already mentioned, that is everything that is in here on the screen, this area, is going to appear for the player, right? And it's correct, game over, it appears. But usually you don't start the game with game over. This only has to appear when the condition for game over appears, right? So we have several options. The first one would be to move the game over outside of the screen, and then to make it appear, to move it here when the game over basically well appears, when the number of lives go below 0. But the other option, and this is the one that I prefer to show you just to show you a different aspect of the games, is that we can make things invisible. So here on the properties, almost at the bottom, we have initial visibility. That's the attribute that we want to change. And I am going to change it from visible to invisible. So just doing that, we kind of like go back to what we had before. So the game over is there, it's just that we cannot see it. So now what I have to do is to go to my events and add another one, right? Add event. To I'll do something meaningful. I should go to system and compare a variable. In this case is the number of lives, and I am going to ask if the number of lives is less or equal than 0. Why less or equal? Why not just equal? It's because we have several enemies hitting my player at the same time, so we could get into a situation where the number of lives go to negative, like 2 enemies that are hitting at the same time the eagle and decrease by 2 or more the number of lives. So from 1 we can go immediately to -1. So if I just ask to equal, to make it equal, then we may never hit this event. If I just say that it's less or equal, we know that it should pass, that it should work. Now the action. The first thing that we're going to do is just go for the game over, our text. And here we have something that is called visible, well, set visible. That is the visibility. So I'm going to set visible, and I'm going to make it visible, right? Because this is what we need to do. So starts invisible. We don't have a game over. 1, 2, -1 lives, -2, and it appears there. So that works. But now we have another problem, and is that the game is still going. I still can destroy enemies over here, and the enemies still keep appearing, and they keep decreasing the number of lives if they hit the player. So it's like the game is still going on. We have the game over label there, but we don't really have anything that stops me from playing. So what I'm going to do is to add another action that has to do with the system, and this one is going to be called timescale, or set timescale. So I usually go for time and go for set timescale. And you have here the explanation that with this you can change the speed of your game. So 1 is normal, half speed, 0.5, 2 is double speed, and 0 is a pause. That's actually what we need. So I'm going to say 0. So let's go for that. So we start with 3, then 2, 1, 0. Game over, and everything stops. Still, there are some things that I could do, you can tell, but well, that's something that we're going to leave like that, at least at the moment, so it doesn't really matter. Now, there is something else that I would like to change, and there are 2 more things that I would like to add to this first game. That is not by any means like a great thing, but obviously is a great way to do your first game. And the first one is that right now, if we hit the game over, we don't really have any way to restart the game. We don't really have anything to say like, hey, I want to play again. Okay? So what I'm going to do is to add another sprite. I'm going to put it here in the corner. This is supposed to be, I'm going to make it a little, that's like this. It's supposed to be kind of like a restart, kind of like a symbol. So I'm doing it here manually. Don't expect anything amazing. So something like this. Oops. Let's do something like this, like a restart symbol. It's kind of ugly, but well, I guess you can find something better online. But we're going to use it for our game. I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to call it restart. And I don't want it to appear at the beginning. I want just to make it appear when the game over starts. So I'm going to do something similar to what we had here to set visible, and is that restart visible, set visible, and visible. That's fine. Now what I also want to do is that whenever the player hits the restart, I want to restart the entire game. So to do that, I am going to add an event. I'm going to say touch, and then I'm going to ask for untouched object. In this case, is the restart, and I have to do several things. The first one is going to be to restart the layout. So I'm just going to go for system, restart layout. So the layout is what we have here. So this is basically saying kind of like restart everything that we have on our game, restart the level. But we're going to have a problem there. Now let's see how that works. We have our lives. We should hit the game over here. The entire restart appears. Then I hit it. And look at that. It tried to restart, but everything is paused. Why is that? because we have never said that the time scale changes. We should also set the time scale to normal, otherwise it's paused. So this is when I'm going to show you something really cool that I use all the time. I could add another action and say set time scale equals to 1, but what if I just copy paste what we have already here? So it's a little bit easier, and obviously you can do it with like your mouse and say just like copy, or you just can use the hotkey that is Ctrl C and then afterwards Ctrl V. So in this case I'm going to do it here, and then I move, Ctrl V, and we have it here. After that I just have to double click and set it to 1. This is still not going to work, but it's going to be better, and you're going to see it why. We're going to again have our lives, game over, and then we restart, and it's still paused. Why? Basically because the number of lives right now is 0. So at some point we hit this event, that is the game over event, because the number of lives is less or equal than 0. We present the restart and we hit it, so we enter this event. But the number of lives is still 0. We're saying restart the layout, unpause the game, but the number of lives is still 0, so immediately it enters again the game over, and this one sets everything back to 0. So what we're going to do is going to system and say reset the global variables. So the lives is going to go back to its original initial state, basically initial value, that is 3, and that's going to work. So just to be a little bit more organized, I'm going to do all that before I restart the layout. So let's see. So we have 0, and now it starts again. So it worked perfect. You see? So it doesn't really matter how many times I do it, it's going to try to do it correctly. So that goes well. So now to finish this part, what I'm going to do is to add the last element that we're missing to make it a little bit interesting, and to add some flavor to the game. And it's that right now I am able to destroy the enemies, but I don't have any score. And it would be kind of cool to give the player some sort of feedback on that, right? We do not have a way to know how many enemies I have killed. So what if I just repeat everything that I did for the lives, but for a score? So what I'm going to do is add a global variable that is called score. It's going to start at 0. And then, since we already have an event that takes care of destroying the enemies, I am going to increase the score. So add action, system, add to, and here now we actually have to pick a score, and you can add as many points as you want. I'm going to just say 10. Okay, so that's fine. Again, we're going to have the same problem that with the score, that is like we need some sort of like text to show me how much I have, how many points I have. So I'm going to say text. I'm going to call this one score label, something like that. And originally I'm going to say score equals 0. And just to make it a little bit different, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and perhaps that's too big, but whatever. And make the color, I don't know, blue, something like that. Okay, and then I need to update also that text. So in the same event that we had here, number 2, that is destroying the enemies, I am going to modify the score label with set text, that is almost at the bottom, and I'm going to say score equals all that inside the quotes, and outside the quotes ampersand score, that is my variable. So now if I did it correctly, I should be able to start destroying enemies. Hopefully before I get destroyed, well, 10. But then I have a little bit more here. And you can tell that I'm using a mouse and it's not the best one possible, but well, you can even tell that I could try to destroy more after I hit the game over, and is updating my score, so that's really cool. Okay, so with this we have the basic for a small game. It's not the greatest, but it has some basically handmade graphics, and it has like a really well-defined mechanic for the game. And after that you can still add many more things during the weekend, but you can tell that in, well, less than an hour, I guess, you could have a small game running. Perhaps I am going to create a couple more videos afterwards just to talk about how to polish this one, but we could call this one a small success up to this point. This is the end of this second video in the series. Quite likely I am going to add some things that in future videos that may or may have not been covered in the presentation that we had. It was 2 hours, and well, we had enough time for questions, but this is a cool project and it would be interesting to see it grow. In the meantime, stay tuned for part 3. I am going to show you how to integrate your Construct 2 game with OpenShift, how to host it, and how to share it with the world. After that, perhaps I am going to share similar projects and give you another examples on what to do for your first games. But I hope that you like it so far, and well, all feedback is welcome at this point, and just let me know what you think.